When we talk about Dark Souls 3, one of the first things people usually say is, yeah, it was great, but it didn't have the interconnected world of Dark Souls 1. That one sentence pretty much sums up the whole debate, because if there's one thing that defined the first Dark Souls, it was that seamless, intertwined world. Every area looping back, full of secret elevators and hidden doors that made the world feel like one massive breathing organism. For many players, it wasn't just a cool design, it was one of the most iconic memories of their gaming lives. Like the moment you arrive at Undead Parish, then you ride that elevator down and suddenly you're back at Firelink Shrine. It blows your mind, and that's exactly why it's so tricky to talk about Dark Souls 3. Because yes, it's different, but guys, different doesn't mean worse. In fact, in many ways I'd agree that the Dark Souls 3 is the most complete Souls-like experience FromSoftware has ever made. The bosses, top tier. The music, incredible. The lore, deep and layered, building on everything that came before. And of course, world. Visually stunning, immersive, but more importantly, it follows a completely different design philosophy from the first game. That's where a lot of people get stuck, because when you hear linear, you think less freedom, less discovery, less magic. But what if I told you linearity, when done right, can be just as powerful? Let's take a step back. Think about Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 7. One is third person over shoulder, the other is first person. Both are brilliant. But try switching their perspectives, and they fall apart. You can't judge them by the same lens, because each game is built for a different experience. It's the same with Dark Souls. You can't just copy-paste the interconnected maze of Dark Souls 1 into Dark Souls 3. It wouldn't work. The scale is completely different. Dark Souls 3 is closer to Elden Ring in that way. You know, if Elden Ring is an open world with some legacy dungeon in it, something like there's a bit of Dark Souls in Elden Ring. Dark Souls 3 is basically made up of multiple legacy dungeons, all connected through clear and intentional paths. Of course, that focus on connecting legacy dungeons sometimes leads to areas that don't really make much sense in the game's world, but I'm okay with that. You can look out from Lothric Castle and literally see most of the world you eventually explore. There's a scene of escape here, of journey. The game is constantly saying, that's your destination, go get there, and that's just beautiful. Now, let's talk about freedom, because that's where people start comparing again. Dark Souls 1 lets you explore however you want. Dark Souls 3 just puts you on a path. That's the claim, but let's break it down. In Dark Souls 1, yes, you can't go to the graveyard early. You can't go to the catacombs. But what happens? You get destroyed. You die in 2 hits. And that's you quickly head back to the main path. That's not freedom. That's punishment disguised as choice. And sure, the game lets you choose which bell to ring first. But nearly everyone starts with the one in the church, because the other path, through Bloodtown, is way harder. So yes, technically there's freedom, but functionally, not so much. Now, look at Dark Souls 3. It is more linear, no doubt. But there are key points where the game opens up. In Irothel, you can head toward Pontiff Sullivan, and eventually Aldrich. Or you can go toward the Porphyrian capital and fight Yorm the Giant. Later, after defeating the Dancer of Burial Valley, you can head to the right and eventually reach the Princess of Lothric, favorite boss fight. Or you can head left, face the father of the Child of Dragon, and then sneak into hidden paths behind him. Or go even further and reach Archdragon Peak, where you face the Nameless King, other favorite boss fight. And don't forget about Catacombs of Karthos. If you destroy the rope bridge before Volnir, it becomes a ladder, leading to an entire optional zone, the Demon Ruins. A tough maze-like area packed with lore, items, and one of the best nods to Dark Souls 1. What I'm trying to say is, Dark Souls 3 gives you room to breathe, to choose, and to explore on its own terms. And I believe that deserves more credit than it gets. Now, let's talk about shortcuts. Okay, I know this is totally off topic, but if you like the video, I'd be so ridiculously happy. I might even torture myself with Dark Souls 2 again. There are core part of what made Dark Souls 1 legendary. The way everything looked back, it felt genius. Dark Souls 3 has its own moments, like in the Cathedral of the Deep. But yeah, I admit, it doesn't have the same jaw-dropping shortcuts. And the ones in the second half of Lothric Castle, let's be honest, they could have been better designed. But here's the thing, Dark Souls 3 was never meant to be about shortcuts, because fast travel exists from the start, and when fast travel is in play, the whole structure shifts. Imagine trying to connect a massive world like this using only shortcuts. It's not practical, and FromSoftware knew that. Even in Dark Souls 1, once you unlock fast travel, the design becomes more linear, the illusion breaks. Think about the route the game leads you through, before you get to face the Four Lords. And let's be real, the second half of Dark Souls 1, the Lord Soul Quest, isn't exactly the game's strongest moment. You're told to find Four Lords, with barely any direction, the only hint as vague cutscene. So, what do? You either explore everything again, or more likely, you Google it. Even FromSoftware knew that section needed fast travel, because retracing your steps through areas you've already conquered, that's not exploration, that's tedium. Dark Souls 3 puts a huge emphasis on visual storytelling. The way the world looks and feels, FromSoftware clearly poured their souls into it. And yeah, even with that focus, there are few rough edges, but that's okay. Dark Souls 1 focused more on mechanical world design. Dark Souls 3 focused more on visual drama. They're different games, different goals, and both are masterpieces in their own right. So no, comparing them isn't the issue. The problem is when we start tearing one down to lift the other up. Dark Souls 3 deserves more love, not because it's better, but because it dares to be different and nails it in its own way. Sometimes, that's more impressive than just doing what worked before.